from the College by the Lake, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Local, regional, national, and international guests discussing the issues and topics affecting the way you live are on Forum, the North Idaho College Public Forum, with your host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
As we commence today's program, I would like to pause for a few minutes to say to you, our viewers, that we're so fortunate to be beginning the 26th year of the North Idaho College Public Forum with you today. It's been a pleasure over a quarter of a century to be with you, and we hope to continue in the future. And today is special to us to start out yet another year with the different stations throughout the Northwest. I'm very pleased to announce that our subject today is the development and future trends in higher education. And we thought it was most appropriate to start this new 26th year by welcoming to our program and to our campus and to introduce to the people of Idaho and across the Northwest our guest, Dr. Ronald Bell, who is the interim president of North Idaho College, and he'll be serving in this capacity through much of this academic year. Dr. Bell holds a BS and MS degrees from Ohio University. His major was mathematics and statistics. He also holds a PhD in the field of higher education from the University of Washington, received in 1969. Our guest has experienced both as a teacher and as an administrator over the years. From 1965 to 1979, he was a tenured faculty member in the field of mathematics at Shoreline Community College. And he also served from 1968 to 1979 as administrative assistant to the president of Shoreline Community College. In 1981, he became the president of Shoreline Community College and served in that capacity to 1995. And during that time, he also served as an associate faculty member in the field of math and statistics. Our guest holds many honors, and he has served in many capacities as an advisory way. I'd like to particularly point out that in 1993 to 1994, that the Community College of the State of Washington, he served as the designated president to the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges to coordinate the creation of a new college in that state. Dr. Bell, it's a pleasure to have you here, and we look forward to this interview and your role at North Idaho College.
Thank you, Tony, and it's a pleasure to be here.
And as always in past years, it's a pleasure to welcome back our regular panel. I thank you for coming back for yet another year. First of all, it's Janelle Burke, who is an attorney in the state of Idaho. And next to her is Steve Schenck, who is the Dean of College Relations and Development at North Idaho College. And we shall ask Janelle to commence today's questioning.
Recently, many students returned to colleges and universities across the country, and there are, of course, new students as well arriving at schools, in addition to those who are returning and arriving here at North Idaho College. Can you tell us something about the demographics of the students that are going to be attending colleges and universities now and trends for the coming years, particularly with regard to age and diversity and level of preparation?
Well, let me start with the nation as a whole. I think it's no secret that if you were to compare current populations with, say, 30 years ago, that you would find that the average age of the higher education population is much higher. And in fact, it's probably about 27 years old. You'll also find that the gender mix has changed. We are experiencing probably about 55% of the population on campuses to be females. Also, across the nation, the racial mix, the diversity on the campuses is very changed, and depending on where you are in the country, for example, if you were in the northern part of Seattle, Washington, you'd find 12 to 15% of your population are Asian. If you were in the Midwest, you'd find a good portion of the students are Afro-American. Here at North Idaho College, I've found that North Idaho College does reflect the demographic mix of this county, Kootenai County, and about 3% to 4% of the population at the college are other than Caucasian. I also believe that you will find that more international students are finding their way to our campuses, causing a cosmopolitan environment on these campuses. There will be a major influx in about 3 or 4 years now of the echo boom, I guess they call it, and there will be many more younger students, or the traditional 18, 19, 20-year-olds coming onto the campuses. Frankly, though, if you were to go, let's stay with North Idaho for a minute, a delightful place, and I'm just privileged to be here, and I love it. You would find between 7 in the morning and 2:30 in the afternoon, it's a traditional campus in the sense you would find your freshman and sophomore students, as you would at U of I assume. I don't know U of I very well, but the little bit I've talked with Dr. Hoover, I have a feeling that we would be very comfortable in the same room talking about the freshman and sophomore students. It would become very different, though, as we talk about the community college aspect of North Idaho College, which then begins to bring in the student population of the returning students, the single parents, those students who really need a restart, if you will, those students who have their four-year degrees and now saying, now I'm back to get a degree to get a job. I'm not being facetious about that or cruel. I'm just simply saying it's a matter of the fact that this community is so fortunate to have a community college, which mission is very different from a four-year school. But at the same time, these students have the advantage of across the street from my office is a branch or a center for the U of I, and then behind that building is Lewis and Clark. Correct, Steve?
Yes.
Yes. What a wonderful combination and advantage for our students. Probably went further than I should have, but if you've got a feeling I have enthusiastic feelings about this place, I do.
Steve Sheen.
Well, Dr. Bell, you just opened the door to a line of questioning that I wanted to pursue anyway, so I'm going to jump ahead to it. Could we talk a little bit more about the differences between community colleges in general and their four-year counterparts, colleges and universities?
Normally, in the higher education jargon, it's what's the difference in the mission. And fortunately, our country has been privileged to have the traditional European higher education, which is basically the major universities are research-oriented. The regional colleges are very concentrated on the master's level and preparing folks for standard jobs, if you will. But the only educational institution that found its birthplace in the United States is the community colleges. And its mission is dedicated to three major goals. One is which, of course, is to help students get ready to go to a four-year school. That's the transfer portion of it. The second is, of course, to have a vocational technical aspect, which deals with everything from dental hygiene, a very sophisticated, complicated area, to something as straightforward as working, well, they wouldn't say it's straightforward, working in gardening. That is not. I frankly kill everything, so it would be a very complex area for me. And finally, the third mission is the community service aspect. Everything from lifelong learning experiences to the fact that, you know, if I'm going to keep my job, I've got to learn how to use Excel, which is a software package. I would really find it very sad if the citizens of this area and northern Idaho were to think that what we should do is just combine North Idaho College with a four-year school and lose the community college aspect of what we have here. So it's this difference in mission. And again, I just want to emphasize, I'll put it this way, my wife and I were fortunate in my last years before I retired to lead delegations across the world in places like Japan, China, Russia, Poland, South Africa. And the reasons we were there is because these countries were asking, what is a community college? We understand what it does for the people in the local areas. How can we start them? And it was a wonderful experience. And I would just say, don't give it up here.
I have a kind of follow-up question in that area, Dr. Bell. Some of the data that I had received for this particular program indicating that we have a lot of different components of students coming in to higher education, particularly community colleges, and we test them in many ways. And we have a growing number of remedial courses for students that are not at a certain level of performance. And then we have the traditional higher education program, the technical programs, and even the continuing education. But an increasing amount of the budget in some institutions across the country are being taken for the remedial programs. How does one, as an administrator or board, make decisions of how to balance all of those very diverse needs?
Well, the first thing I looked for when I came to North Idaho is, what does your major mission statement say, its goals? And it starts out by saying we're dedicated to student success. And if you're truly dedicated to student success, and especially in a teaching institution, and I want to emphasize that's a major difference in mission as well, that community colleges are teaching institutions. They are not dedicated to to research, which is very important, but we're dedicated to teaching and helping students move along. If you're dedicated to student success, then you've got to find out where your students are so that you can move them through the morass of courses and technicalities in order to become successful. And I'm going to use a statistic about a college in the Seattle area that has nearly 15,000 students, and they tested them, and they found that 70% of their students were not prepared for college level writing, reading, or math. This is not atypical, I'm sorry to say. And it reflects on what I hope our nation's trying to do, and that's saying we've got to go back to our K through 12 system and start insisting on certain standards. I'm very much in favor of that movement. I don't think, though, that it should be based at the national level. I think it should be based at the local level, with our locals recognizing they must insist on standards and assist their faculty and their administrations to do that. Now, when you get to a college where the academic tradition is that the faculty are very much involved in setting the curriculum, you have to help the faculty recognize that we are dedicated to student success. And although I personally, as a mathematician, would much rather be teaching linear algebra and differential equations, frankly, what I'm doing every Tuesday and Thursday night is I'm teaching high school algebra. But when I go there, and I'm doing it here because I love to teach, and I do it once a year, and I don't get paid for that in addition, so we get that straight now. But I do that because I want to model the fact that we must take our students from where they are to help them get to where they need to be. And I'd love for you sometime to interview some of the students in these night classes as well. You know, the day classes are dedicated as well, but the night students are especially dedicated. And they're in there, single parents, retreads as I call them, students who have tried this more than once, and they are a product of, now I all of a sudden decide I know what I need to do. Some folks who are newly married and who are all of a sudden recognizing that $5.50 an hour isn't going to cut it. So the faculty themselves slowly but surely have to recognize that, yes, maybe they'll have to give up some of the icing, the wonderful advanced classes, and yes, dedicate much more time working with the students at the level where they are. But there's something very rewarding about the fact that when you take a student who may be still at the remedial level, they have all kinds of euphemisms for remedial nowadays, developmental, whatever you want to call it. When I was in school, they called it bonehead. But you know what? It was all right. I found out very quickly I was a bonehead in a certain area, and I'm glad I figured that out because I got into that area and became successful at it. And I always point out to my students, I flunked a lot of exams. I didn't do well in a lot of areas, but persistence and good mentoring got me to the fact that now I do have a PhD. And of course my dad would say, that and a nickel's going to get you what? But you know what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. Anyway, it's not an easy task. Stoney asked a very difficult question. If you are trained, we are trained, most of our faculty have masters and PhDs. They are trained at a level which is to say you're trained to be critical thinking and you want to go forward. And all of a sudden you said, but now I'm going to bring you back and you have to teach high school math. They have to be dedicated to teaching. And I have to tell you, NIC is. That's another advertisement again, I guess. Yeah,
that's appreciated on this program. I have one follow-up question. And I know that none of us have all the answers to these problems. Money is always a challenge to the quality of what you're trying to do. But because we have all these different missions and great need for a lot of attention to the students, we hear a lot about downsizing in business around the country, and we're hearing it in higher education now too. And I know I've looked at some numbers from some states where there's a tremendous growth in part-time faculty, and I see that's a two-part problem that I'd get you to respond to. And part one is that as the growing, I've heard in some states it's up to 65% part-time. What that does to those employees without fringe benefits and proper salaries is one ethical question. But the second one is, what does that do also in trying to meet all these different missions that we have for our students when faculty are not around enough to spend the hours that are needed? And what I'm attempting to say is that a part-time faculty person cannot be expected to have the same amount of dedication and time that full-time faculty have.
Well, you're, to use a street jargon, you're right on. I was one. I were one. I guess I are one now as a part-time faculty member. But we in higher education knew a long time ago that we were being pushed into a corner because people wanted more and more output and with less and less resource. And since in most places 85 to 90% of your budget is in personnel, and if in fact you get more and more demand and the resource doesn't grow, the only place you go to is, how do I do this in a less expensive way? By the way, that's what businesses do. And they're always saying to higher education, be a business. And then we say, yeah, but to do that means we have to use less and less full-time staff. Well, don't do that, because that's not fair to them. And so you find yourself becoming schizophrenic, because I honestly believe that if a school gets less than 60% in full-time, you're in big trouble. Now, NIC happens to be in a very wonderful situation. They are somewhere around 70% full-time. And we're studying that now for the board to come in to talk about ways to, how can we maintain that as we grow? Also, how can we have maybe possibly less headcount in part-time? Headcount's a terrible term. Human count. The fact of the matter is we are analyzing that now. I hope as I leave, and if this decision isn't made, I can pass on to the permanent president the fact that the school will try to find a way to find what is the bottom line that they don't want to go below, or the lower bound, if you will, for the percentage of full-time versus part-time. It's very complex, though, because you have to look at each discipline itself. You have to find out what's available. You may want 4 full-time people in a very technical area. And the only way you can do it is, if you're responding to the community need, is to say, we'll need, for example, sometimes you need lawyers. And I'll say, okay, would you like to come teach for us full time? Well, they look at the salary, and their answer is, I don't think so. But I'd be willing to teach part-time. But would you be willing to advise students and do these other things, even if we paid you? Well, I don't have the time. So, Tony, you've identified one of the crucial problems that's hitting the nation, and it's becoming, of course, in California, it's becoming a major issue there, where I think the unionized parts of that state are trying to find legislation that will put this lower bound, if you will. Again, let's talk about how good it is here. You're around 70%. It may be that we could go as high as 75%. Now, that's the catch-22. If you're truly a community college, you don't want to go much over that, because then how can I respond? You'll become very much like the traditional higher education. In comes Steve and says, all of a sudden we have this need over here. And I say, well, we haven't got any money because everything's in full time and we can't respond to you. And it'll be like something that needs only happen for a year. So I don't know where I'm going with this, except to say I would hope that NIC is able to maintain its good full-time, part-time faculty mix, find a way to have a, if you will, a gate. What do we call those things when you don't want the water to back up on you? We have a trap. So that we don't want all of a sudden this trap to not come down and say, that's it, we don't go below this for our full-timers, because if we do, we're going to start losing that which makes us very unique, in that we are able to work with our students, provide all those extra services. And everyone says they want participatory governance, and especially in higher education. And you don't have participatory governance when someone's streaking up and down the freeway to make a living as a part-timer. And we call those the freeway streakers. And I can tell you there's a streak of them going back and forth to Spokane and here.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Janelle Burke.
I want to ask you some questions about trends for the future in higher education, community colleges included. And the first one has to do with costs of going to college for students. Are costs really prohibitory for many students, or do you think that if a student really wants to go to school, they can find a way to do that?
Well,
and can we talk some about the cost of higher
well,
education?
you all,
it's skyrocketing.
you certainly identified all the issues, haven't you? 72% of the students at NIC are on some form of financial aid, and your tuition here is relatively low compared to what I'm accustomed to seeing. That tells you something about, is it too expensive? The answer is, in this area right now, it really is very difficult for students. For example, those night students I have, I know what it means when I say, haven't you gotten the text that's associated with this text? And they'll say, how much did you say it was? And I say, it's $25. That's a lot of money to folks who are struggling. So tuition's relative. As far as I'm concerned, that's why we don't want to lose a community college concept. We do talk about it as being as open door as possible. It really isn't. We can't take all students who want to come because of the resource problem. And we want to make it as financially accessible as possible. And normally, community college expenses per student cost is relatively low compared to our four-year colleagues because we don't have the research, we don't have the highly expensive programs. So I'd hate to see us lose the two-year school because it does provide for a lot more access. Now, what about the trend across the nation? There's a lot of suspicion about the fact that some four-year schools especially are gouging tuition. I can't speak to that, but I can simply say that watching the expense of support services, and if you're in a private school especially, that everyone knows everything's gone up. And I think there will be some investigations which will help us recognize whether these $25,000 to $30,000 tuition rates that we're talking about are out of line. But as far as I'm concerned, I think we can only expect, if our economy continues to have some inflation, that the cost will increase. As we get the bulge of more and more students coming in, you will have to have the capital costs that are associated with it. So I don't think I remember everything you asked, but I'm...
That's the question that I had. And do you anticipate that there will be partnerships between various colleges and universities in order to accomplish more in terms of financial assets?
Did you happen to see the
availabilities?
publication that came out? I don't know who put it out, but it showed the partnership of NIC, UI, and LSC? LC, I can never get it straight, but it's, you know, Lewis and Clark. That to me, you know, that was another one of my dreams come true. I don't have to go find this relationship. It's here. And the article that Steve wrote for the paper where he was using the word cost savings. And I said, Steve, I'm going to act like a taxpayer. Don't tell me I'm getting savings when you're causing, whoops, you're causing me to spend more money. But you can demonstrate that you're avoiding cost increases by combining things. And that's where the partnership comes in. We have the same parking lots. We are sharing new spaces so that we don't all need new spaces. We can share all kinds of infrastructures. And those are the cost avoidances. We have to put money into our higher education if it's going to be of quality, and we can let it grow. But if we can combine like we're doing here, we can cost avoid all the major increases in some way or another, most of the major increases.
Dr. Bell, one of the things that's driving cost increases in higher education is technology.
Yes.
How is that changing education?
Well, first of all, we sit here in a TV studio, and for those folks who are burying their head in the sand about distance learning, saying that, oh, no one's going to be interested in that, and so forth and so on, let me ask you a simple question. How many of you have met Princess Diane? How many people in the world felt an affinity and felt influenced by that person? It was all through the media, all through electronic connectivity. A good instructor who knows how to use electronic connectivity using a combination of video, computers, audio, will be, I can't say there'll be another Princess Di, but I have seen those faculty who know how to use the media, and they're coming from those who were brought up with the media. So I don't fight with the faculty who are old as I am, who say, oh, I don't want to do that, and I don't believe in this. And I say, fine. But I turn to those young Turks who are excited about the fact that I like to watch TV, I like to use a computer and the like, and I really believe that I could do a lot of my work sitting at my office on that break that I have or at lunchtime. And ladies and gentlemen, I have a lot of friends now who are a lot younger than I am who are getting their MBAs and their MSs and all that other, and they're even doing lab work because they're actually at the laboratory in their companies, and we don't have to buy the laboratory. So you just hit one of my chimes. Technology is where a lot of it's going. On the other hand, if you do not have someone who knows, they have to know their discipline, they have to be excited about it, have a passion for teaching, have an interest in trying to learn how to communicate at a distance and close by. Without that, you're not going to have the magic you need. I guess that we should expect 25 to 30% of our FTEs, that's the way we count, you know, being done, I think, electronically by the year 2010. And I think that's a low figure. There are those businesses out there who are now preparing degrees who are not public institutions, who are learning, hey, there's money in this. If we can get accreditation, and we're going to do this the way people want it. So anyway, technology, but Steve, let me ask you, how much do you think it costs to keep current in technology? That's a rhetorical question, right?
A lot.
A lot. So when people say, well, we want our education to be relevant, and I say, well, that means we got to keep the equipment current. And I'll say, and how would you like us to do that? Well, for nothing. Do it free. It's a catch-22. It doesn't work that way. Be a business, though.
If I have time to follow up quickly, and I know we are running out of time, but is technology the key to what business, I think, is asking us to do as educators today, and that's become more productive? Is that one way we can do that?
It's one of the tools. To think that technology is going to solve all the problems, of course, is not going to be the case. But the question is how much. Your neighboring state, I know, has built a huge infrastructure now, K through 20 they call it, and they are ready to have that start moving. And I think, you know, I'm over here, and all of a sudden now I'm what do you call ourselves, Idahoans? Yeah, and I'm very provincial about this is the best state in the nation. But we really got to pay attention to what's happening around us, because I think there's a lot of good stuff going on. So I'm encouraging our faculty and staff to get out, go find out what's going on somewhere else.
I have the signal we have less than 2 minutes left, but certainly the President of the United States, Bill Clinton, is joining in what you're saying in the fact that we have over the years gone from build up to K through 12. It used not to be that many years, and now he's indicating that we should add 2 years at the community college level. And so just in like 30 seconds, do you think this is the path that we're taking in the future?
Yes, and they did it by restructuring the tax code. You see, now they've made it possible. It's sad to say, when you're in this business as long as I have, it usually does come down to bucks. And they've done the right thing. I think we've made it possible for our grandchildren, my grandchildren, you're too young, to have the K through 14 pretty much as part of their heritage, part of which they should be getting is just being an American.
On that note, Dr. Ronald Bell, we must bring this program to conclusion, but I'm going to say on behalf of the panel that we'd like to have you back during your tenure at North Idaho College as president. We just got started, and you have so much to share on this issue of higher education. We will invite you back at a later date.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, our guest has been Dr. Ronald Bell, the interim president of North Idaho College, and I'd like to invite you to be with us again next week at this same time when we will discuss yet another issue. And I would like to say in closing that we're so pleased to start the 26th year of this program. We look forward to seeing you next week. Please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum was videotaped live from the studios of Instructional Technology on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to join us again next week for another all-new edition of the North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station.